All right, today we're going to dive into just 4 lines of poetry. 4 lines from Emily Dickinson that are going to completely flip our whole idea of power, failure, and what it really means to face a giant. So it all kicks off with this line. It's so simple, right? I took my power in my hand. Just picture that for a second. A small hand, one single smooth pebble. Dickinson is setting a scene here that feels, well, it feels almost biblical, doesn't it? It's a real David and Goliath moment. But, and this is the key, the battlefield is not at all what you think it is. Okay, so let's get into the action. The poem just throws us right into it. There's a throw, right? It's aimed at some giant enemy. And then there's this dramatic fall. Now, if you just read it on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward. It's a story about a heroic attempt that, well, that just didn't work out. But to really get the depth here, you've got to know a little bit about the author herself. We're talking about Emily Dickinson. She lived this famously reclusive life out in Amherst, Massachusetts. But think about this contrast because it's wild. While she was totally withdrawn from the world, she was creating this entire universe of almost 1,800 poems. And get this, most of them she just kept locked away. She never published them. That context is absolutely crucial to understanding what's going on here. And the action in the poem, it's so fast, it's almost brutal. She takes her power, she aims her little pebble, and then boom. Myself was all the one that fell. That huge, grand gesture aimed at the outside world just completely collapses inward. Suddenly the focus isn't on the giant anymore, it's all on the person who threw the stone. And that right there, that's the pivot point of the whole poem. This isn't about fighting some enemy out there in the world. No, this is about a confrontation that's happening completely inside her own mind, inside the self. So what the poem does is it forces this massive shift in perspective. We're not in a classic David versus Goliath story anymore. We've moved into something so much deeper, myself versus myself. See, the whole objective changes. It's not about slaying the giant, it's about measuring the self. Real power here isn't about landing the perfect shot. The power is in the simple act of asking the question in the first place. You know, this actually brings us to a really cool idea from psychology, the Jungian shadow. What's that? Well, it's basically the part of our subconscious that holds all the stuff we don't want to admit about ourselves. You know, our fears, our biggest insecurities. Dickinson's poem, you could say, is a duel with this shadow. The part of her that wants to be a hero is the exact same part that's just terrified it's just not big enough for the job. And here's where it gets really fascinating. Believe it or not, this whole poetic collapse thing, it actually has a physical echo inside our own brains. The way the poem is built, it's almost like it's designed to hack our neurology as we're reading it. It kind of unfolds in these 3 steps. First, you have the aim. That's when your prefrontal cortex, the ambition center, just lights up. Then comes the fall. Your amygdala, which is basically your brain's threat detector, just flares up. It goes on high alert. But then, and this is the amazing part, you ask. You ask that big question. And your brain gets this hit of dopamine, not because you won, but for the sheer courage of asking the question, for this radical self-inquiry. And this is pure genius from Dickinson. The poem's structure, its actual rhythm, mimics this whole process. You get this steady, confident meter that builds up all this heroic momentum, and then it just snaps. The rhythm literally breaks on the word fell. It forces you, the reader, to feel that neurological launch, the miss and the collapse, right there in the words. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. This poem was written in the 1860s. Why should we care about it now? Well, here's why it matters. Because even though Dickinson's personal Goliath might have been the suffocating walls of your domestic life, our giants, they haven't gone away. They've just changed their shape. The Goliaths we all face, they just evolve, right? I mean, back in 1862, it was about domestic walls. Then you jump to 1985, and we're talking about glass ceilings. And now, say 2026, we're up against these invisible, massive algorithmic giants online. The enemy on the outside keeps changing, but that internal battle, that stays exactly the same. I mean, just think about it for a second. We're all fighting these burnout wars, right? And what about the constant pressure to perform? This idea of performative power all over social media? That nagging feeling of imposter syndrome? Or the huge systemic barriers that are just there? These are our modern-day Goliaths. And all of us, we're still standing there, pebble in hand. So, all of this brings us to one final, powerful way to look at this. We've seen the throw, we've seen the fall, we've felt that collapse. But what if that's not the end of the story? What if that's not the point at all? Let's just ask the question head on. After everything we've talked about, the aim, the throw, the big fall, is this a poem about failure? The answer is no. It's a poem about a secret victory. See, the fall isn't the end. It's actually the beginning of the real event. And here's the reframe, the big twist. The goal was never to hit the giant out there. The throw was just a catalyst. Its whole purpose wasn't to win some external battle, but to spark a revelation, an internal one. By trying to do the impossible and by falling, the speaker is forced to look the real opponent right in the eye, her own internal measuring stick of too large or too small. That is the only Goliath that actually matters.
This is a concept you could call radical self-inquiry. And in this new way of looking at things, the fall isn't weakness at all. It's where all the power is. And the victory? It's not hitting the target. The victory is finding the courage to just ask the question.
And so, in the end, this is where we're left. The poem doesn't hand us a neat little answer. It leaves us with something way more powerful, a question. A question that is so much bigger than any answer could ever be. It's a question that dares us to measure our world, and maybe more importantly, to measure ourselves. Was it Goliath was too large, or was myself too small?